Well, hello everyone. I am joined here today by Catherine Kretzschmar. You might have an association with her with Alex from Self-Hosted. They've been kind enough to have me in their home this week, which has been super fun. We've got to know each other a heck of a lot. And Catherine, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How is it feeling being in a podcast seat? Because this might be one of your first experiences.
This is definitely my first ever experience.
Wow.
And it feels more than a little weird to have a microphone pointed straight at my face.
You get used to it. It kind of fades into the foreground.
I hope so.
Try not to look at it.
But at the moment it's staring right at me.
It becomes your friend eventually.
Maybe.
Thanks for joining me and doing this. I know we're kind of squeezing it in last minute. I'm leaving tomorrow, but this is a real treat that we're able to do this. So thanks. I wanted to ask you a question about being here in this home specifically. I've gotten to get a taste of Alex's sort of environment, of course, with Self-Hosted and everything that he does in his curiosities around automation, home automation, and his day job at Red Hat and things like that. Of course, the home has a feel of that kind of stuff, right? Some experimenting and tinkering happening a little bit all the time.
Yeah, just a little.
How is that for you as someone's spouse who has to kind of live in that space and deal with the technology on a daily basis?
Well, I mean, obviously I'm married to him, so I'm quite fond of him being him, and all of the, I don't think I can underestimate how many little projects he has on the go at any one time, whether it's 3D printing something or physically woodworking and making things, or all of the self-hosted server building, home automation things. So because of that, I think what most people don't realize is that it's constantly changing.
Right.
And that you're asking me at the moment for a snapshot in time of November 2019. And probably if you were to ask me again in a month's time, especially since Alex will have had some time off for Thanksgiving and Christmas, everything will have changed.
Right.
Because he loves playing with it and upgrading it. And that's, I think, the fun for him. It's not having a finished system.
And all of these things are constantly evolving, which is kind of the beauty of them, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's always something more to learn, something more to upgrade.
And it's always improving.
Right.
And occasionally things break along the way. And I try not to compare it with a standard home. Oh, it's finished. It's not. It's not. The whole house is a project.
Okay, right. And I suppose you kind of have to just sort of accept that if you're going to live there, right?
And he's very aware of things that are essential and things that are not. If it's something to do with, say, the heating or the air conditioning, he is very careful not to leave it in a half-finished state, because we don't want to be overheating on a 100-degree day.
Or underheating.
Or underheating. But things like lights, where there's actually a switch somewhere, they're currently in upgrade mode. That's fine, because I can just go and use the switch like a peasant.
A lowly, not Alex, maybe. I found myself the other morning, I woke up a little bit earlier than both of you. I think you might have been out of the house actually at that point. And I found myself trying to figure out how to turn the TV on. And because I have only been here a few days, that's never anything I had to do before. And Alex was sleeping and I didn't want to wake him. So I was like, okay, I think I can figure this out. So I tried, the obvious remotes and things like that, and nothing was working. I was like, okay, I imagine this is probably plugged into something that is automated, right? And sure enough, I had to reach to the back and hit the switch on whatever he's got back there. And it all worked, which is fine. But that sort of backup is certainly appreciated, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And I imagine that leads to the eventual success of these integrations for you into your lifestyle, because it's like, okay, if it doesn't work during the experimentation phase, okay, well, maybe it's a bit more of a pain, but it eventually gets there, right?
Yeah, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
There are some things that have not changed in a while, because some things have been. Actually, I'd say the TV is a pretty safe bet.
Okay.
You just say turn on TV, and that one has worked for a good few years now and has not changed. But the TV used to be one of those ones that maybe 5 years ago, maybe more than that, maybe more like 8 years ago, used to frustrate me, I have to say, because sometimes I'd get to the point where I just can't make this thing work. And he would be out of work or something, and I'd end up with propping the iPad up.
Oh, like you're on an airplane or something.
Yeah, just sat on the table with his iPad propped up, just like, I've given up.
Oh, no. Well, especially during those moments when you just want to relax, typically around the television, right?
Yeah. Sometimes that's actually led me to being more productive. Like, on a couple of occasions, I can't get this thing to turn on. Right, I'll have to go and do something else. But I don't think that's happened for at least 5 years since the TV is. I mean, back in the old days, there was no home assistant. Alex was doing all of this with various different apps and
I see.
Little weird bits of electronic circuit boards that are, I don't know. I just see him soldering things and nod and smile.
So it sounds like it was a bit piecemeal before.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, he tried
to integrate like an Xbox. They had some sort of home automation thing back in the day. He tried to use that, but it wasn't very good. And the whole voice recognition back then wasn't very good.
Yeah, it's come a long way.
Yeah. And then he went through a period where he had one of those Harmony remote that had about 1 million buttons on, and he programmed all of them to do different things with lights, so you had to use the one remote to rule them all, to do everything. And that was pretty good. But it could get itself turned in knots sometimes as a device.
How does it feel for you now that some of those things are more stable? Like, has it brought a quality of life to you specifically that you appreciate?
Yeah, actually. I don't think I realise it until I go maybe stay in other people's homes. And then I realise, I think one of the big ones that I love is that I can lie in bed and say, lights out. And I don't have to get up, and I don't have to remember to turn the main light off before I get into bed. I don't have to reach over when I'm really comfy and settled and turn the light off on the nightstand. And then we go and stay in a hotel, and I'm irritated by the fact I have to move to turn the lights out.
It sounds like a little thing to anyone who hasn't experienced it, but
it's a real quality of life upgrade to not have to do that.
Absolutely. And I've experienced that here as well. We've kind of gotten into a groove, and Alex will typically say, lights out.
Bedtime routine.
Right. And then 20 minutes later, like, the lights just slowly dim down in the entire house. So it's lovely.
That actually was in order to try and manipulate us.
Okay.
Because we had this tendency that we would go to bed, and then we would both sit there. I would sit there reading a book, and I would read until far too late. And he would be reading Reddit or articles online and thinking of things, which sometimes led to him jumping back out of bed and go, I've got an idea.
Right.
So it was kind of our way of being stricter with ourselves to make ourselves have a better sleep work balance.
Yeah.
And not lie in bed for 2 hours reading a book when I need to be up in the morning. So we say bedtime routine, and we get a reply, bedtime routine initiated. And that gives us enough time to let the dog out, come back in, and the lights are out in 20 minutes, and we go to sleep.
And you're also out in 20 minutes.
Yeah, and it's good. It's got to the point where the dog now hears that, and he jumps up and walks to the back door because he knows bedtime routine means that he has to go out first.
Wow.
And he goes out, and then he just trots to the bedroom.
That's fascinating. Because when you look at some home automation stuff, when you're uneducated, perhaps, it feels like, or uninitiated maybe is the better word.
I think uninitiated,
It feels like it's a bit maybe gimmicky, or like just some superfluous technology. But to hear that it's actually affecting your quality of sleep, therefore your quality of life in the morning and those kind of things. And also, Archie, your dog's routines as well, then it kind of points to the power that some of this can have, even if it's simply turning lights off, right? But it can really change things for you.
Yeah, we also have one that gets to 11:15 and just gently dims the lights in the main house to kind of give us a
hint,
and to make us start feeling more sleepy, because if you're in a bright environment, you're less likely to be feeling ready to go to bed, especially if you're looking at a TV and seeing all that blue light.
Of course.
So if you dim them and make them more like an orangey colour, because most of our lights are LEDs, so we can control the colour as well as the brightness. So we change it to make it warmer, and that actually makes you feel more ready to go to bed as well.
It feels like having our environment, our artificial environment, our homes and things like that, start to mimic the natural environment in ways that works for our evolved body, right?
Yeah.
Is
just trying to make it feel more like sunset.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like finally we're figuring that out, right?
Yeah, we're not fighting it. We're embracing the technology to help us live more naturally in our homes.
Which is the whole objective of technology, I think, right?
Yeah.
Is to up our quality of life. And so if it can help our circadian rhythms and those kind of things, then bring it on.
Yeah, definitely.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about some educational stuff you're jumping into recently.
Yeah.
Can you give us a tour of that?
So I'm sure lots of people have heard of these like online things, like to learn coding boot camps. Mine's not an online one that I'm doing. I'm doing an in-person, it's a course. There's about 20 people in the class. It's a 6-month course, run by the university here. Nice. University of North Carolina. And I think it's something that I've thought of in the back of my head for quite a few years now. And I have learnt some HTML and CSS by myself before now and could make a sort of basic web page and things. And it does, I think, come from living with Alex. And he went through doing his master's in computer science, and I would sort of proofread his code and debug it a bit for him, and he was
that's fun.
You're really good at this. You have the right brain that just fixes and just sees how it works. And I think it may be in a different life, if I hadn't gone down the music route, it might have been, well, I probably would have done like maths and science. That was the other things I was doing at A-level. I was doing like maths, further maths and music and things.
Because they're related, right?
They are related.
Yeah, in many ways.
They're very similar. I was also doing chemistry as well. But I went the music way. But I've sort of been sitting there in my head since that time when he was doing his master's and when he was a junior developer, and if he had ever had stuff he brought home, like it wouldn't work, and I was, no, that means that because logically that's that. And he's like, Catherine, you'd be really good at this. And I really enjoy that sort of puzzle solving. You've probably seen me when I watch TV. I don't actually watch TV. I sit there and do
solve
like
puzzles.
I do like logic puzzles and things.
Yeah.
Those Beyond Sudoku. That's a great book. Has all sorts of really all different logic puzzles that are all unusual. Great book.
It sounds like solving puzzles is something you can't get away from.
Yeah. And with these things, he's like, why don't you just... And so I've tried to learn some by myself. As I said, I have a basic understanding of HTML, CSS and stuff, and could do a basic website. And I tried to learn some Java, but without kind of some structure or an end goal or just projects to do that I don't have to think of myself, I've kind of run up against a wall.
Okay.
So I thought, let's try more formal things. So I applied to this coding course. And so far, I think we're on like week 4. So
Okay.
I'm not a long way through the 6 months, but having deadlines, having 3 classes a week to go to. So it's about 10 hours a week of classes, and homework you have to do every week and submit on a Saturday.
Consequences, right?
Yeah, has actually been very rewarding. When at the beginning of the week I thought, how am I going to make one of them? I can't make it. The last one was making a password generator. So you had to make a website that if you click on a button, said generate, it generates a password, however many length characters the person wants. If they want uppercase, lowercase, special, whatever mixture. And it generates it, it puts it on the website, and you can copy it to the clipboard and onto your phone or your computer or something. And when they first told me that,
I can't do that.
I can't do that. I mean, I can make a pretty looking thing that looks like it would do a password generator, but 4 days later, I did manage to do it. So
that must feel pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a little stressful at times, that particular one, but...
Well, pushing just outside of your comfort zone is stressful, but in all of the best ways, right?
Yeah, and sense of achievement on Saturday when I finished it at 5 p.m. and I had until midnight, so I had hours in the bag. A few anyway.
How does that feel for you for your end goal? Like you were mentioning that having something formal and an end goal like that was a helpful thing. Does it feel like you're going to learn a heck of a lot in the next 6 months minus 4 weeks, right?
Yeah, I think I am. So I'm in the first 2 weeks. We did a very brief overview of HTML and CSS,
which you had a bit of experience.
Which I had a bit of experience with as well. And honestly, most of the people on the course also knew a reasonable amount of. I was quite surprised to find that most people on the course are not complete. It's not just random people that have never coded before.
Okay.
So there's at least 5 people that actually work in the tech industry for their day jobs and have been sent on it by their companies and things.
Oh, right.
There's someone that works for GitHub that's on there.
Cool. You're in good company, it sounds like.
Yeah, there's somebody that works for the local radio station as a web designer, and she just does front end, but they want her to become a full stack developer, so they've sent her on the course to upgrade her skills. So by the end we'll have learned JavaScript, jQuery, Angular, Bootstrap, SQL. Can't think of anything else. Loads of other stuff. That's probably the next 2 months.
Yeah, it sounds like it'll give you like a overview in a kind of a shallow toolbox of all these different pieces, and then you can kind of dive in from there on the ones that interest you or the ones that are necessary.
Definitely. I don't think they're ever saying that you're going to be an expert on any of those technologies, but you'll know enough to know what to Google.
That's so important too, right? Because it gives you an avenue to self-learn. Really.
Yeah, or know enough to know what areas interest you and where you want to go and where you want to dive in and learn more.
Of course. Well, I can't wait to hear where you're going to dive into in 6 months.
Yeah, well, I don't know yet.
and no ideas, no temptations?
I was surprised to find that, this is going to sound very odd, for me, I actually really like doing some of the front end things and making it look pretty and change for different size screens and that sort of stuff. And I had more of an eye for that than I thought I did. I never thought of myself as a particularly creative sort of person, honestly.
I would argue that, but
but I found that actually really quite pleasant, trying to work out which sizes and designing and putting it together and styling. So far, I've only done front end stuff, so I don't know yet. But I think I find the JavaScript not too hard. The logic behind it seems like a simple version of Java, which I have done a bit of.
What I was impressed by, something I picked up on, you showed me your little password manager, which I've never created one of those, so kudos to you, was that, it worked really well and it was beautiful and all of those things. But there's something that you said that I picked up on, which is you described how maybe it wasn't the best password manager in terms of security. So I noticed that you're picking up on like the back end of things that
Yeah, I did. I think it could be eminently hackable, because one way I managed to push my password back to the HTML was I put .inner HTML, and that could be very easily hacked by a very simple script, because almost any website could have that particular.
True.
It wasn't very specific, but it worked.
Well, that's the first step, right? And then you can harden it from there. But
Yeah.
I think the real value there is you're seeing, okay, here's the next way I can improve this. And that's a huge indicator that you're just going to keep diving in. I think the way that Alex has that insatiable curiosity is also in you, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, not to quite the same extent. I don't manage to have the blinkers on life that he can have sometimes.
But the great thing I've noticed is that you're both different, and yet you overlap enough that they're really complementary, which is really sweet.
Yeah. I find this kind of weird, because when we first met, we were both studying music.
Oh, right.
And now we're at a place where we are not really doing music. I mean, music is still my day job. I teach music 6 days a week. But I don't do music at any high level anymore.
Okay.
I do very much the basics with small child after small child after small child.
And the occasional adult like
and
me.
The occasional adult, yeah. Brent had a piano lesson with me.
My first ever, which was really brilliant.
He was really very good.
Thank you.
And he should be a musician.
Oh, who knows what my 6 months will bring.
Because he's definitely got an ear for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can hear when things were wrong. A lot of people just blindly
keep going.
Keep going.
See, and I don't know that, so I was just being me, right? And,
yeah, but you were listening to what you were playing and realised when the melody didn't sound like you expected it to sound, or I think at one point just your chord didn't fit with my bass line.
Right.
You picked up on that instantly and went, ooh, and changed. For some people, most people, have to learn to listen as they play and are too focused on just
the mechanics of
it, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm blushing. I don't know. What's really curious to me in that is that connection between a lot of these different topics we've been talking about. Like you mentioned music. You've been, you have quite a bit of education in music.
Yeah, a little.
Can you walk us through that a little bit?
I've been playing since I was very small.
Okay.
About 6. I went to a junior conservatoire as a teenager in London and travelled down to London every Saturday. I went to Junior Guildhall, followed by a scholarship to RNCM, Royal Northern College of Music, where I did an undergraduate degree and I did a master's in solo performance. Graduated in the middle of a recession as a freelance musician.
Yeah, right. Not the easiest thing.
Yeah. Yes, I'm a solo bassoonist.
Ready for hire.
I spent a year working in Sainsbury's and doing the odd freelance gig that didn't pay enough to live off.
That's how it goes with freelancing at first.
Yeah. The economy just seemed to be getting worse. This was like 2008.
Oh gosh.
And made the decision, because the UK government at the time were giving very generous bursaries to train to be a teacher. So I did a teaching PGCE, and since then I've mostly just been doing classroom music teaching.
Okay.
We moved to London. I was doing some of that, the occasional freelance gigs still, make a little bit of money, and some teaching at the evenings and weekends.
Right.
But yeah, it wasn't where I intended to become. But I think that's what most people, right? I'm sure most people say that about what they hope to achieve and what they do actually achieve.
I think what's probably important there is being flexible and open to other options, right? Yeah.
I really can enjoy teaching. Sometimes enjoy the teaching.
Okay. What I was going to wrap that in with was how it's curious to me how both you and Alex have a musical background. And you both seem to enjoy this problem solving of puzzles and that kind of thing, or at least exploring them. And it's related now a little bit to the tech world as well. Do you think like there's something about a musical mind that ties all of that together?
I don't know if it's a musical mind, but maybe they're just kind of similar, like brain patterns.
Yeah, okay. Like pattern recognition or something?
Yeah, I think so. I actually think at least some of the coding I've been doing is more creative than music.
Wow.
But I did very much classical music.
Yeah.
I've never really dabbled in jazz, or I've never learned to play the guitar or anything like that.
Okay.
So I was very much hardcore classical orchestra sort of music, which is very strict and full of rules. And you'll realise that you've been in an orchestra rehearsal for 3 hours and haven't said a single word because you're not allowed to talk.
Right. You mentioned that it feels like it has more creativity. Where are the areas where you felt like you've been able to be creative? Because usually in education, you have very specific problems to solve. But you feel like you've had some wiggle room in there?
I think that the problems are specific, but there's been several different solutions.
Oh, that's nice.
And I've gone down one route and realised or seen that there could be several routes to achieve the same outcome. Sometimes I haven't seen all of them, and I'm like, oh wow, they've done it a completely different way to me. That's interesting. So part of the thing on the course is they quite often give you like a 20-minute, very short exercise. Fix this or make this, or they give you a web page and they say, okay, make the buttons actually do what the buttons are supposed to do,
right?
Or something. And the way I've done it has been one way, and the way the teacher has done it is he sort of codes it out at the same time, and then he lets you see it after the 20 minutes. So he stands there typing away, doing the same exercise as you are. And the way he's done it is completely different. And the way the person next to me has done it is completely different.
And yet the end goal is achieved.
Yeah. At one time, I even managed a, I think, more elegant one than the teacher. And I put mine in like 3 lines of code in a nice little loop, and he wrote all his out.
Nice.
Admittedly, I think he was distracted by eating Chick-fil-A at the time.
But I think there's I find that to be, it's something I really appreciate in coding. I did a little bit myself, and that it can be so creative. Like most people who haven't had a taste of it yet don't see it as very creative. It's like, you sit in front of a chair and type into a screen all day. But the reality is, if you can wrap your mind around that problem and just dive right in, that creativity is like such an amazing outlet, right?
Yeah.
To express yourself in many ways. Even though it may not seem like that to someone who hasn't had that opportunity.
Yeah. I don't think I got that until I'd dived in a little deeper and thought,
Well, and I imagine the more complex your problems are, the more
interesting your solution could be.
And the more creative it needs to be, right?
Yeah. Like sometimes the creative solutions are the most elegant looking ones. And sometimes they just look a bit janky and hacked together.
You hope to aim for the first one. But
yeah, of course.
Sometimes you have to get to the second one before you can loop back around.
Yeah.
That's great. I wanted to mention also that you and Alex had a bit of an anniversary yesterday, an unusual anniversary. We were discussing that hard drive failure.
Oh, yes.
That happened. And so Alex was telling me that, and if you listen to the brunch that I did with Alex, he mentions this specific hard drive failure that happened to him on a Seagate drive. Was it 8 years ago?
Yes. I don't think we're allowed to say the word Seagate in this house.
And that changed
everything.
Yeah. So how did that change everything?
So before that, he was quite happy having, I don't think it occurred to him or us not to just have stuff, store it on a hard drive. It was as simple as that until this hard drive started going click.
Yes.
Click,
you know
click.
The sound too.
And we lost everything that was on it.
Oh.
And it was one of a batch. They'd bought all the same hard drives. And then the others started making click noises. And Alex was thinking, oh no, I'm going to lose. Because the first one, all we lost was some ripped CDs or something.
Oh, that's lucky.
But they knew that on the other ones, he had photographs on and he had things that were completely irreplaceable. So the hunt began for a better solution.
Right.
And he bought like a Synology NAS, and that then led to him thinking, no, this isn't the best solution either. And this was back in, I don't know, about 2008.
Okay.
No, this would be 2009, I think. While I was doing teacher training.
Of course.
So I was pretty much out of the house and working all the time, because if anyone else has done a PGCE in the UK, it's pretty full on.
Okay.
So he was left with time and empty thought space to come up with a better solution. And he met some a chap called Stephen from Georgia. And I always call him the dog because he had an avatar of the dog. So in our house, if you ever hear conversation about the dog,
right, it's not
actually
Archie.
Our dog, no. So they started talking online, and Alex just went into this headlong, deep dive into virtualization.
Wow.
And having virtual machines on his computer as his way of
solving problems
and having multiple systems running and having hard drives and backup hard drives. And I can't remember the name of that system that he uses.
It probably is constantly evolving.
It has changed a few times, and I've had it explained, and I've been drawn diagrams, and I just can't remember the name of it. And so that he was working as a genius at the Apple Store at the time, just fixing computers,
right?
Which he still likes to do.
He was loving repairing my X250 that I got recently.
He was having so much fun. He's now decided that he's going to buy broken computers and put them in our bonus room closet and just fix them when he feels bored
or feels like in need of some therapy, right?
Yeah, doing something physical with his hands. So, and he did all the virtualization and storage stuff and had NASes with different dividers, and I don't know. You can see how much I know about this stuff. In his own time, and he did all this virtualization stuff, and he got really, really, really into it, and to the point where he was like, I need to know everything there could possibly be to know about this. Back in the day, before Docker, before containers, before most of these things were done. And so then he had to play with hardware, because a lot of the hardware you could buy at that point, you couldn't do virtualization on it.
Oh, okay.
Not like today, when most
these
things...
are the golden ages we're in, right?
Yeah. But back then he had to swap out his motherboard for a different one, and then he had to work out what was compatible with it. And so we went through a whole computer building era where we had to find the best components that we could actually do the virtualization that he wanted to do.
All right.
And this conversation with this guy and all this learning led to him saying, yeah, I'm a genius. It's fun. I like fixing computers, but this isn't what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
His grandmother had passed away not that long in that period, not long before that. And she had left him some money, like £5,000.
That's amazing.
And it was actually his mum's idea. And she said, why don't you go back to university? And by the way, did you know that the course at the University of East Anglia is £5,000?
That seems lucky.
So
or
it seemed,
serendipitous.
Yeah, so it just seemed like something that had to be done. And that kind of kick-started his change of career. He still kept on being really interested in all the storage.
And still is.
And still is. Always has been. When Docker came on the scene, he jumped on that. If you look behind you, you can probably see the Docker Con whale.
Yeah, I do. We're in Alex's office currently.
Yeah, from back when he was so excited about that we both went to Barcelona to go to DockerCon because he was desperate to go and find out everything container. That's 2015, 2014. I don't know. It says on it somewhere.
And all of that led to where you are now, right?
Yeah.
Which is you've emigrated here and jumped from one continent to the next.
Yes.
And now you're in the US. And how is it being here? Is there a culture difference? I know you mentioned right before we had this conversation, you asked, should I try to speak more American during our conversation?
Yeah. Well, in the last year, I've got used to translating my inner thoughts, just the odd word, the odd concept, and changing them for the American version, especially since I teach children as young as 4 or 5.
Right.
And if I started talking about primary school or a rubber, they would have no idea what I was talking about. So I've trained myself to translate when I was in 6th grade at elementary school,
right?
Even though I didn't, but translating all my words that have different ones.
So you've picked up on where people give you strange looks, which words people don't quite.
Most of the time. Occasionally, I say one and everyone looks at you and I realize, what's one I haven't. Mm-hmm. The other day I said paracetamol.
Oh yeah, I know not what that is.
I think it's acetaminophen here.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, I said that a couple of times and I realised that the person I was talking to was just looking at me. What's she talking about? I don't think they knew if it was a British thing or if it was just them not knowing something and they didn't want to say. I was actually talking about Calpol, which is paracetamol in sugar syrup that you give to little kids.
Really?
Because her 2-year-old daughter was having earache. And I was in England we'll just give them some Calpol. She was like, what's Calpol? What's paracetamol?
I find those cultural differences, in language, they're pretty obvious, but there are also cultural differences, which you may or may not have picked up on yet in different technological communities. I think what you'll begin to learn in your education is each community based around different technologies have these words and these tendencies that are culture in themselves. And sometimes you have to do the translation between them if you're working between those worlds.
Navigate between them and swim from one to another.
Which I find totally fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but I guess that's us as humans. We always want to put in our own personality on everything, or
we've both come up with the same idea separately and so
called
given
it something different.
Yeah. I feel like that's a way a lot of the reason between the British American things are different, because they've just come up with it separately,
right,
and given it different words. I think the words are easier to deal with than the cultural differences.
Can you give me an example of a cultural difference that feels trickier?
I have to remember not to swear as much.
Right.
Especially in the South.
Okay.
It's fine with your friends.
Yeah.
But in Britain, I wouldn't feel too worried about swearing in front of a parent or something.
Right.
Not obviously about, but a swear word slipping in, I wouldn't. But I'm very careful not to, because it would, you'd get an odd look.
A different reaction here.
Yeah.
It's less accepted?
Yeah, I feel like that. I've realised that British people swear a lot.
So you're learning things about yourself as well?
Yeah, I thought it was normal until I realised that other people didn't.
Right.
And the conversations I have with my parents, I see people who are you would talk to your parents like that? Yeah.
Where that's just totally commonplace.
Just normal, yeah.
I think you'd find probably a similar reaction in Canada, is that we approach the American acceptance of swearing, which I wonder, does it make it more potent when you do use it? If you're
maybe
using it in regular conversation, does it lose a little bit of the...
I think it does, actually. Yeah. Well, if you hear someone else, then they don't normally, because they're a nice southern person that's been brought up well and are very polite. And you hear them, you're like, whoa! And it's kind of a shock.
Right. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question. If you had an ask for anybody who's listening, something you'd like them to try or think about or do, perhaps, is there something that comes to mind?
So one of the things I was doing before I moved here was I was actually a humanist celebrant.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you describe what a humanist celebrant is for us?
So they conduct, in my case, funerals, but they can do baby namings and weddings. You will also need a person in the UK from the council if you're having a wedding. They haven't had it, so you don't need that yet. But, okay. And they conduct ceremonies, and they have particular sort of worldview that is not related to government and is not related to religion, and just believes that you should be good for your own sake, for the sake of the wider community that you live in, the world community, your local community, and that, it's devoid from other things. And it's sort of a way of looking at the world and being good to animals and humans and plants and just trying to be a good person.
So being truly all-inclusive.
Yeah. I would say if anybody hasn't heard of that they should look it up and check it out, because I think it's amazing.
Well, can I ask you a little bit more about it?
Yeah, sure.
Well, first, what attracted you to diving into this topic? And
honestly, it was when my dad died, and he was very staunchly, aggressively atheist.
Okay.
I'm not saying humanists are, I'm not saying I am, but we were struggling to think of what to do for his funeral service and not to include anything that he wouldn't want.
Because they're typically tied to a religion or some kind of...
They usually are tied to a religion, even now. And you get these people that have not really been at church in 20 years, and they end up having a priest that doesn't know them. So
of course.
Do a funeral service. And that led us to searching on the internet and finding out about these humanist services, which can be... They're very, very bespoke, and they can be anything you want, and they can show the person's personality.
Wow.
There's been some, when I did my training, I heard about all these random ones where people got brought up in their rally car, and their coffin was sort of jammed in the back, and they drove it into the crematorium, and they had no speeches, but they just had 40 minutes of metal music. Yeah. That's what that guy wanted. Fine.
Wow. So it sounds like a way of really personalizing the entire process.
Yeah. It can be whatever.
Which sounds like that's kind of the point anyways, right?
Yeah. So that's about the type of services you get for the humanists do. But when I found out more about it, I realized it wasn't just a service that you could go online and order a person to come and do your funeral service.
Right.
Although we did have a chap come to our house, and he was absolutely lovely. He was a retired vet.
Oh, wow.
And as in veterinarian, not as in veteran. And see, translation.
Yes.
He came to our house, and he was one of the nicest people ever. And he let us do what we wanted, and wrote this unbelievably pleasant tribute of a man he hadn't met, but he'd gleaned. He talked to us for like an hour and a half and found out everything he could, and just got a picture of my dad and wrote this wonderful thing.
That sounds like quite a skill in itself. It's like getting to know someone that deeply and to be able to reflect their personality in a way that even their loved ones find touching. That sounds like a real gift. And
that was most of what the training was focused on, was actually that interviewing skills and writing skills, and taking that information and writing it into a document. But when I found out more that it wasn't just pay for a man to come to do your thing, that it was actually just this whole way of life that it isn't a religion, it isn't a political, it's just a view of the world that's really very nice. And you can pick and choose, and you don't have to, you're not like, I am a humanist. Like, it's just, and you don't go to, it's not like you go to meetings, it's not like becoming a Jehovah's Witness or something.
Right.
Like you have to assign yourself to this. It's just a way of looking at the world, and it's just a very, very uplifting way of looking at the world. They believe you have one life, and it's up to you to do the best you can and to enjoy it and to live it the best you can, and not worry about the rules of religion or of a country. It's to worry about the people closest to you, the animals, the plants, your environment. Are you doing the best you can for them? Are you improving the lives of those around you?
Yeah. What an important question for all of us, right?
Yeah.
With, you know, you can apply it pretty broadly too. Like, just as you were speaking, I was thinking, okay, you could apply that to your closest loved ones, of course. But when you mention things like environment and plants and animals and things like that, it feels like, okay, well, you could apply that also to Archie, your dog, right? And you can apply it to the direct environment around you, like your yard or something like that, but also to the greater environment. Like, look at what is a hot topic now of, you know, the climate crisis and things like that. So it sounds almost like a personalized philosophy, in a way that you get to craft and change as you evolve as well.
Definitely.
That you can apply in a really positive way.
Yeah, and it's not prescriptive.
Right.
And it's not rules sent down from somebody or something above. It's from, you're only doing it for yourself.
It's like introspective.
Yeah. Well, since I went through this journey, I've consciously found myself thinking, no, that's being a bit selfish. You can do better than that. And trying to be a better, nicer person.
So it sounds like it's really pushed you in all the right directions.
Yeah.
In many ways, you know, and you get to define what right means in that context.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you. That I'm going to have to dive in more with that, but that sounds like a really important place to put your mind and heart to start some kind of adventure, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That's great. Catherine, thank you so much for sitting down with me and doing this chat. It's been super lovely, and I hope people really enjoy our conversation. It's gone in places that
we didn't expect.
And that's the best part, right? I think that's really a treat. So thanks for being on the journey with me.